Assalamu alaikum. Dopamine is commonly associated with reward and is somehow the synonym of pleasure, while serotonin is contentment or happiness. But in our society, pleasure and happiness both are often used interchangeably. But scientifically, these two neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin, are totally different in their structure and in their function. Dopamine basically says, this feels good, I want more. While serotonin says, this feels good, I don't need any more, and it's enough. So, prefrontal cortex is the region of our brain behind the forehead above the eyes, which is associated with our cognitive abilities. It makes us think in a logical manner. Full development of the prefrontal cortex in humans is generally achieved till the age of 22, more or less. This is the reason that kids and teenagers are less logical and practical and have involvement in highly adventurous and risky actions. In simple words, prefrontal cortex makes us think about future scenarios, and a person with the dysfunctional prefrontal cortex only can think of the present and will only have the reward mechanism to survive. There is another neurotransmitter that is cortisol, which is associated with the stress. It is present in both the cases, addiction and in the depression. The chronic stress with the high dopamine activity will lead to addiction, and chronic stress with less serotonin activity will lead to depression. How do these two hormones work together? These two neurotransmitters work together. Dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter, which means it stimulates the receptor neurons. The problem it causes is chronic stimulation of the neuron cell that ultimately causes neuronal cell death. If the neuron is stimulated for the longer period, it can get exhausted and dies. And the cell death caused by dopamine is called addiction because once the cell is dead, we need another dose to stimulate another neuronal cell. Dopamine has less coverage in our brain and has only 5 dopamine receptors in our brain. In short, we are fighting against our brain to get pleasure, which is not even going to last much longer. Now let's see the serotonin. It is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, so no overdosing is there, no cell death is there, and at least 14 different serotonin receptors are there in our brain, which generates an effective response. The interesting fact here is that the pleasure hormone, that is dopamine, does the same to serotonin. Dopamine also downregulates the serotonin receptor and causes depression. So high dopamine activity with chronic stress can cause depression. Therefore, pleasure and stress are the enemies of happiness. Dopamine versus serotonin. Pleasure is for the short term, while happiness is for the long term. Pleasure is when we take gift and happiness when we give gift. Pleasure is associated with the things we do alone, like eating, watching movies, etc. While happiness is associated with social things, like celebrating your friend's birthday, etc. So extreme pleasure can cause addiction, but there is no extreme of happiness nor any addiction. Pleasure is dopamine, happiness is serotonin. If you have crossed your teenagehood, then your prefrontal cortex is enough capable to differentiate between what gives you pleasure, that is dopamine boost, and what gives you happiness, that is serotonin boost. Stress is often underrated but is the key element in the genesis of addiction and depression. Avoid stress, don't look for pleasure, and go for happiness. So here it ends. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe the channel. Allah Hafiz.